Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint, Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I'm delighted to be joined by Sasha Karnets, MVP Karnets IT Training and Consulting Croatia, who will be talking to you today about Azure Security. Where do I start? Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC19. Don't forget to check out the Azure Week. Don't forget to check out the Azure Week Packed Resource Center. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click the content link at the top. ESPC 19 Teams discounts allow you to book 4 tickets and receive your 5th ticket free. That's a huge 20% discount, worth up to €1,795 for a huge amount of team learning and development. Join the best SharePoint, Office 365 and Azure practitioners in the world in Prague this December and go to the next level faster together. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com for further details. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have for Sasha in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you will be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Sasha Kranets. Hello, Sasha.
Hello Shane. Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for attending this week's webinar. Well, today's webinar in Azure, which is part of Azure Week. And today we will talk about Azure Security. Where do I start? So where do I start? Azure Security is a huge topic, and we'll certainly won't be able to go through everything in 1 hour, but at least my plan is to give you an overview of Azure security features, and if you haven't been into the Azure so much, or if you forgot anything, then this will be a nice refresher. And a little bit about me. My name is Sasha, and I do Azure and security. I also do consulting in architecture and custom and vendor courses. Also Microsoft Azure MVP and certified trainer. I'm also a MCT regional lead and certified EC Council instructor. Down here is my Twitter handle if you want to get in contact with me, so please feel free to do so. And speaking of Azure security, first, a little bit of boring basics, but yes, Azure security is not just about the cloud provider's security. So it is also our part. Why I think this boring slide is very important, because in my work, I often see that the customers usually forget about their responsibility as well, if not forget that greatly neglect their responsibility in the cloud as well. So they somehow over the time they start to think that most of the security is the cloud provider's responsibility. Yes, that it is in part, but as we see here, there are responsibility zones, and there are responsibility areas that are always at our place. There are responsibility areas that we are responsible of taking care about security, but there are responsibility areas of a cloud provider as well. So if we talk about on-prem, then the responsibility is all ours. But if we talk about software as a service, then there's a greater part of security responsibility is on the cloud provider side, in this case on Microsoft. But there's also our responsibility as well. So the point is to secure all the and at least to try to do as much in securing our Azure infrastructure and services as we go along. So in software as a service, there'll be a little bit less work to do, but in the infrastructure as a service, there'll be a little bit more. So, for example, if you use virtual machines in Azure, so Microsoft will be responsible for securing the physical network, physical storage, and virtualization platform. And that means updating the host and so on. But we as customers need to take care of helping securing our virtual networks and public endpoints and updating the operating systems of our VMs and so on. So that's the analogies. For example, if you buy a state-of-the-art alarm or anti-theft door for apartment or house, then the manufacturer of the alarm or manufacturer of the doors did his best to make the doors or alarm as secure as possible, but it's our responsibility to lock the doors or to turn on the alarm. So we can't blame the manufacturer of the alarm or the doors if we didn't close the doors or secure the alarm. So there is partly also our responsibility. So regardless of the deployment type, we as customers, we always retain responsibility for our data, for our endpoints, for access management, of course, and for the accounts. So if we lose a password or an username and place it on a USB and we forget it in a car or in a taxi or a cab, then it's our responsibility. So no matter how secure our Azure environment is, then this might not even be called breach, but negligence and our fault if we didn't follow the best practices. So it's important to understand the division of responsibility that between us customers and cloud provider. And speaking of which, Microsoft Azure it's a very secure platform, and well, obviously, Microsoft is a big company, and it's investing a large amount of money in not just in Azure itself, but in Azure Security, and so it would be a disaster if we found imagine if we found a announcement tomorrow in the newspaper that there's been a huge breach in the Azure data center, so that probably would mean a great loss of profit and trust in us in customers in Azure. So that's I hope that's not going to happen, and it's even with the banks. We trust the banks, that the banks are secure. And here we talk about Azure, and we trust the Azure, that Azure is secure, and we even have a dedicated website, a trust and compliance website that we that we have where we can check everything transparently that goes on with Microsoft Azure. So Microsoft has a very comprehensive approach to protect our infrastructure, and the global cloud infrastructure includes hardware and software and networks and administrative and operation stuff and everything. In addition to securing the physical data centers, so Azure is secured in layers, and each of these layers are very, very secure, and that brings us to the different different model. So what we don't know, and there is a huge Microsoft takes a very, very serious approach to security and threat defense, and that does internally. So that is prevent breach and assume breach, End-to-end breach is a defensive strategy aimed at predicting and preventing a security breach, and they play blue teams, and well, play meaning they work in parts as a blue team and red team, while where red team simulates real-world attacks to the network, and blue team detects and protects against these attacks. But there's also in that cloud defense in-depth strategy and preventing and soon breach. You might think that there is this should be solely Microsoft's responsibility, but it's not. So our responsibility starts with the first ring, and that's the DMZ, or the old school, like the militarized zone. So all these Microsoft Azure Security, it's strengthened, and well, a higher level of security is achieved if we go through layers and secure each layer individually, but there's also our responsibility here as well. So like we mentioned before, each of these services has its own security features and knobs and switches that we can turn on and fine tune. We also heard a great deal of Azure security information on Monday's webinar, where Mustafa Roman talked about Azure Security as well. And our services, our approach to security need to go from the fundamental ones, and where should we apply all the necessary security measures. So the core services should be they are networking, storage, and compute, and management is here to tie all these core services of Azure together. So these are the basics, let's say, that host all other services, or if nothing else, they host a great deal of our infrastructure, of our data, of our presence in Azure. And these tiers have different the core services have different services and different features to be secured, like Azure Firewall, Gateway Security, network security groups, and RBAC controls, secure service endpoints, and so on. So out of the all of these security services, security features that encompass core security services also need to have a sound management and monitoring. So here is the Azure Active Directory marginalized, let's say, at the far right of the screen, but that doesn't mean that it's not important. So security identity is very important. One constant discussion and between professionals out there is whether the security starts with identity or networking, or with what it starts actually. Well, I think it should start with both, because we should first try to first in parallel secure our identities while we secure our presence as well. So there's no one big switch where we should go and then and switch it on and say, okay, our infrastructure or our services, our presence in Azure is not secure. No, unfortunately, there's no such switch yet. But our task is, or responsibility is, to go to all the services, to all the features, and tighten up security in a layered approach. So while there is no absolutely secure system in this world, and but we, in a layered security approach and in a shared responsibility, we try to achieve as the best security possible by making two things, by emphasizing two points. So the point is to increase the time the bad guys need get to your data. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is to make the bad guys attempts very costly. So eventually, if theoretically, if an attacker has infinite amounts of money and infinite personnel and knowledge, then they will be able to eventually get your data. But the point is that we have to make the bad guys to make them their task as hard as possible. And probably if they get your data in 25 years time, then that data won't be very valuable anymore. So the point is to increase layered security. A layered security increases the time and the amount of money that someone needs to get your data. So we have we need to implement that approach here as well. Where should we start? Well, let's say I should start 5 things parallel, but it doesn't work. But I should start with securing VNets, as VNets are the first thing that we create when one of the first things that we encounter when we work with infrastructure in Azure. And if we want to secure our connections to Azure, we can also, so we have network security groups that inspect routes using virtual firewalls, VNets, NSGs, and so on. So on a 5-tuple filtering decisions. So what based on source, address, destination, port, and protocol. And these are the NSGs, the quoted simple firewall, the filtering rules that govern how our traffic is controlled in and out of our virtual networks. There's also network security groups actually contains a list of security rules that allow or deny inbound or outbound network traffic. And the NSGs can be associated to subnet or network interface, and then that's how we can control our security of the data coming in and out of the virtual networks. So to simplify management of security rules, then we have different inbound security rules, different outbound security rules, and we can't delete the default rules, but we can add the other rules with high priority. There's another thing that has been here present with us a lot of time since ages, but it hasn't been so visible until now that the second tier is available. It is the DDoS, or distributed denial of service protection, that we have in Azure. So now that we have a standard tier, that that we have to pay for, and now the customers are aware of the basic tier as well. That has always been here, but we didn't have to pay for that because it offers the elementary protection. But Azure DDoS protection combined with intelligent application design and best practices helps defend against denial of service, distributed denial of services. We have basic and standard tier, and basic tier is automatically enabled as the integral part of the Azure platform. And this tier includes always-on traffic monitoring, and it provides the protection through the entire scale of the Azure Global Network, and provides protection for IPv version 4 and IPv version 6 public IP addresses, while standard is the service tier that provides additional mitigation capabilities over the basic service. And DDoS protection standard is simple to enable, just requires no application changes, just one click. But yes, you do have to pay extra for it, but it protects your infrastructure a little bit more. The protection policies are fine-tuned through the traffic monitoring and machine learning algorithms. The policies are applied to public IP addresses across the resources that exist already in virtual networks, such as VPNs and load balancers and so on. So, well, it protects also Azure Service Fabric instances and etc. Speaking of websites, and we in web apps, we also have a dedicated app service environment that is the fully isolated and dedicated platform as a service environment. And if we want really secure app environment, app service working environment, it costs a little bit more. But then it provides a securely run, privately deployed service apps that you can scale easily, and also it allows you for higher memory, higher CPU utilization, along with better security features. What else do we have? We have also various things to secure on our virtual networks, and these are the virtual network service endpoints. And these endpoints work together with IP restrictions to enable the NIVE rules at the VNet and subnet level. And what does that mean? It means that we don't have to create any network address translation devices or gateway devices to create the service endpoints. We just click on a service endpoint in a pull-down menu and click on it. When we enable it, then with a simple click, these endpoints are enabled. And what the service endpoints enable us, these enable us to connect directly to Azure services without going over the publicly available network, directly to our infrastructure, for example, to access the databases and so on. But in the overall picture, there are a lot of protection services in Azure, like DDoS protection, like we mentioned before, web application firewall that we mentioned as well, Azure Firewall network security groups we already mentioned that filter and control inbound and outbound network. And also we have a service endpoints, like we mentioned, and all these protection services are part of the zero trust model that we have. So zero trust model, in contrast of the fully trusted model of the on-premises, means that we assume we trust no one. So we tight security on each and every step in each and every layer, as if it were the only one on the network. So by doing so, we greatly increase security of our infrastructure. So what else do we have? Well, we talked about the NSGs. It's bigger brother or sister, that is Azure Firewall. Azure Firewall is a cloud firewall as a service. It's a managed cloud-based network security service that also, besides layer 3 and layer 4, also has the network address translation capabilities, and we can centrally create and enforce application network connectivity and policies across all the different network and subscriptions as well. So the Azure Firewall is a stateless firewall, and uses a static public IP address for every virtual network resource that needs to go outside firewall. But it's a very flexible. It's a very flexible feature. It's Microsoft. Azure Firewall. It's a Microsoft product, but we don't. If we need a little bit more a little bit more features, some other features, some different kind of features, then there's always marketplace, and there are always third-party firewalls and appliances that we have. For example, these are just a couple of examples out of the tens and hundreds of tens of available appliances. But then while the firewall as a service is a let's say platform or software as a service in Azure, these third-party firewalls are often deployed on a VM on the infrastructure as a service model. And then that means that we also introduce some additional layers of cost, responsibility, and so on, and complexity. But that's up to you. So whether if you're satisfied with Microsoft Azure Firewall Service, I'll recommend that one. If you need something more sophisticated and with more granular control, more features, then there is Marketplace here that might bring you the solution. So we secure the network. We also have the possibility to secure the storage while on rest, while in motion. There are a lot of features. If we talk about cloud service provider, if we talk about Microsoft, then there is a storage service encryption that's on Microsoft side that automatically encrypts customer data, and it's Microsoft managed solution, and Microsoft manages the encryption keys, or we can use our own encryption keys with Azure. Azure Key Vault. But if we talk about us customers, then we can secure our data on different tiers, whether we talk about Azure VMs or platform as a service solution or applications. There are different solutions for in each tier. So if we talk about securing Azure VMs, then there is this, for example, SQL transparent data encryption. There's BitLocker and third-party tools. If we talk about platform as a service, there is the TDE SQL database TDE. And if we talk about a complex application, then there is client-side encryption through .NET Crypto APIs and so on. So the storage encryption in Microsoft automatically encrypts data using 256-bit AES encryption. It can be disabled and work with all kinds of storage with Azure queue and table storage, Azure Files, Azure Blob Storage, manage this and so on. Storage security, like I said, there are different options. We didn't mention shared access signatures that we use to delegate access to, and everything else that tied to that. But different tiers have different capabilities. For example, there's also different tools to secure our databases. Just an overview of database security in securing our data in the databases. Azure SQL databases and can be secured. Well, as we talk about layer approach, there's a picture that displays that layered approach here as well. From the outside to the data, there's network security, and we have firewalls, VNets, rules, service endpoints. If we talk about access management, there's Azure AD and role level security. If we talk about threat protection, then there is a SQL auditing monitor. Monitoring is very important, and that's part of the security as well. There's advanced threat protection that's available on for our databases, and at the end, there's also the protection of the data itself, of the information. So that's always encrypted. Feature dynamic data masking, as we saw this in a presentation in webinar Monday, and transparent data encryption. If you want to have a little bit more details, I suggest you go to that webinar as well and see a little bit in more detail how these things work. And these databases, the databases and the customer data is for example protected on using a layered approach with this approach. So for example, we can use also, as we mentioned, for this securing our websites, for securing our disks, for securing our databases, and we also have Key Vault secure storage that is also backed up by hardware security modules that we can store we can use to store any kind of almost any kind of secret. Where are these keys? And the secrets, different kind of secrets are website passwords, or any kind of password, or certificates as files. And these values are irretrievable. So even if there's an option to store the key within Microsoft, even the Microsoft cannot retrieve your secrets. But there's a possibility, if for legislative purposes and for compliance purposes, to store your keys on your side, then that's the option as well. And the Key Vault is very powerful, and it protects it gives you an additional layer of security and protection to any secret that you have in Azure. So to go further on with the with not so obvious security features, it might not be a specific security feature, but yes, it can be used to raise security a little bit. So the load balancer task or core feature is not a security feature. It's obviously load balancing, that's the name stands for. But it's it can be it can protect also on-prem web apps or Azure web apps with secure remote access. And also we have two types of the load balancer, public and internal. But if we speak, if we want to protect a little bit more web application, then we have application gateway. So the gateway is the internal only gateway, or internal facing gateway, or combination of both, is the dedicated and OSI layer 7 load balancer, and also provides a 3.9 and 5 uptime service level agreement if we deploy multiple instances of the gateway. And it also provides a web application firewall feature. So the different the constant, I won't say struggle, but I'd say the constant discussion, what was the first, which is the first line of defense, whether it's network or whether it's identity. It doesn't matter as long as we secure both things. So we talked a little bit about networking and securing things in networks. But when it comes to securing identities, then there is Azure Active Directory. We have also different solutions based on the Azure Active Directory as well. But definitely Azure Active Directory, whether it's deployed alone as a single instance or together with Active Directory services on premises, it provides a identity and access management service and a very important cog in Azure whole Azure picture. So the Azure ID combines core directory services, application access management, and identity protection, which is the most important thing to Azure. So there are multiple benefits for Azure Active, as we talked about Azure Active Directory, whether it's single sign-on or protection of cloud or on-prem workloads or identities. So we need to take care of our identities and our users very strongly, carefully, and very seriously. Speaking of identities and users and accounts, there is a basing thing that is a user account that we protect here, and why should we tackle with the user accounts? Because the account is used for authentication and authorization. So if our accounts are quoted breached or compromised, then our infrastructure is as well. So we have tools to protect our accounts as well. The one we mentioned already is Azure Active Directory, but that's just one cog. And we also have layered approach security here as well. The first thing, which is very important, is RBAC, or role-based access control. The role-based access control define what actions are allowed or denied on your Azure subscription, and we can scope it to a subscription resource group or specific resources. And it's very important, and I suggest that organizations or individuals scope smartly and the different actions allowed or denied actions to different users accordingly. So we had the principle of less privilege on premises, and that should be brought in the cloud as well. So don't give your users more than they need, and that should be brought from on-premises here as well. So while limiting the users what they can do in a specific area of your Azure subscription is one thing, but preventing them to be a weak point for the bad guys, for the attackers, would be to use Azure MFA. Azure MFA, as whether we like it or not, it's a very important part, and there shouldn't be even a discussion whether use it, whether should we use it or not. So I'm not exactly sure about the statistics and about the percentage of the MFA of the attacks that MFA can prevent, but some researchers say that MFA can stop filter out from 90 to 99% of problems that you might have if you don't have MFA enabled. And since it's a very simple approach, then the suggestion is to have it enabled, not just for administrators, that should be obvious, but for every other sensitive user account as well. And I know that for some users that didn't have the MFA applied, enabled before, now it will be a hassle to go with the second factor authentication. But this is something that should be persisted on, and you should protect your accounts as you protect your houses and cars. So when you go out of your building, out of your apartment or house, or when you leave your car, then the first thing is to press a button and on your remote, or turn the key and lock the premises, or lock the car. So that should be turned on as well. So it will bring additional 5 seconds to your login attempt, or 10, but it will drastically increase the security. And I've introduced the MFA slide in here because although it's very simple and pretty straightforward, or let's say we shouldn't even be talking about this, because it should be enabled for everyone, and it should be enabled by default. To protect our identities even more, there's also a strategy and tools in Azure that can help us to do that as well. So to do that even more, MFA Azure Active Directory are the one things, and there are other services as well. So if we have a more complex environment, if we have more users, if we have more administrators, if we have organizations that have merged, and tracking who does what and who has what, which level of responsibility and access, it might be difficult, but there is a tool that can help us with that, and that is the Azure Active Directory PIM, or Privileged Identity Management, and that is a service that enables us customers to manage, control, monitor access to identity resources in our organizations, in our subscriptions. So the resources include access. The resources that the PIM takes care of are Azure resources, Azure AD, Office 365, Intune, and so on. But to use it, we first need to have Azure AD Premium P2 or Enterprise Mobility and Security E5. Azure PIM is probably won't make sense for a 5-user environment or 10-user environment. But if we have multiple user environments, then it makes sense, because the key features of PIM allow you to assign access to resources, and to require approval to activate privileged resources. So if how does that help us to secure environment? So without PIM, we either had a privileged role, that means an administrator role, or we didn't have it. So if there are a lot of administrators in our organization and users with privileged roles, we don't have any overview how these roles are consumed, how these roles are are being used, and whether the roles are used at all, and at what time, and so on. So the privileged identity management actually helps us very much, because it introduces the just-in-time access. It includes the just-in-time access. It includes the term eligible user. That means that the user still will hold his privileged role or administrative role, but it won't be able to consume the role unless actions have been approved, or his role hasn't been elevated and approved by a manager, for example. Not just this, but the PIM also gives us the insight how these privileged roles are being used throughout the organization. So, for example, we might have certain users that haven't been using the role in a couple of months. So that raises the question whether these users actually need such a role or not, and so on. So the PIM can help us enforce MFA and require approval for these roles, and so on. So there's another service that can help us in secure our identities in the Azure, and that's the identity protection, or Azure ID identity protection. So the identity protection can help us to see how our identities are doing, and to receive notifications of identity risks. And when we see these risks, so we are able then to take recommended actions, or perform recommended remediation. And also we can respond automatically or manually to these actions with conditional access policies. So what does it mean? It means that we got a bigger overview picture of our identity threats and vulnerabilities to our identities, and to perform actions against any event that happened. For example, the identity protection might tell us that a user logged in Amsterdam 5 minutes ago, and then a minute ago a user logged in from Japan, which is impossible, and that brings that generates an alert. And if a user, for example, has logged from a vulnerable operating system, or from a vulnerable device, or has performed a suspicious activities, then these kind of users are blocked, or temporary blocked, raised an alert, and then we are able to perform additional actions and remediate these kind of threats. This is just one sample of the things that identity protection can protect us from. Linked credentials, sign in from anonymous IPs, addresses, impossible travel, like I said before, and if we sign in from the locations that we haven't been at before, all these suspicious actions raise an alert, and are stored as risk events that we can respond to. So we can respond to user risk policy. We can respond using user risk policy or sign-in risk policy, and we can do that automatically or manually, whether it's devices or users. We are protected throughout the entire Azure subscription. Speaking of security, there's also a very important part, and there is monitoring. You might say, why monitoring? There's no way monitoring can. It's not directly security feature. There are not no knobs and switches here. No, but the monitoring is very important, and there are a lot of sources of monitoring data that can be used and to populate different stores in Azure. But you can't tell what's wrong if you don't know what's normal. So that why you need to have a baseline, and that's why you need to monitor your resources accordingly. So monitoring your resources, it's a crucial part of strengthening and raising the security of your Azure infrastructure. And I'll go briefly over Azure Security Center as well. We saw the Security Center on Monday as well, so I won't repeat things. But the first thing that you would encounter in Azure Security Center is a lot of information, a lot of different information for different resources, and the Security Center can help us really to get secure really faster. So to protect again different threats for not just for cloud but for on-premises workloads as well, and to get secure faster with discovering and onboarding different Azure or on-prem resources, or we can integrate also with existing SIEM solutions that we have. Speaking of SIEM, there is also a cloud-native SIEM for entire subscription, entire Azure, and even on-prem as well. So the Azure Sentinel collects security data across an entire Azure or on-prem organization from different users, application servers, devices, and so on. So it uses the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and identifies the threats very quickly. And what's more important, it gathers all the things, all this information from different sources in one very powerful and analytical engine. So it's built in Azure, and it can scale practically limitless, and it's a very speedy SIEM solution. So with it, we don't focus on how the things work, but we focus on what we have derived from the information that we gather. So the very important is that you only pay for what you use, and you bring your Office 365 data for free in Azure Sentinel. So I suggest that you take a look of Azure Sentinel as well, at least if you have Office 365 to get insight how Office 365 is performing. And it'll take a little bit to gather the data, but then it's a very powerful platform to work with. Before ending, I'll give my word to Shane, to see whether we have any questions whatsoever.
Thank you for a great presentation. Yeah, and now we will start the questions and answers part. And should you wish to ask a question, type it into the questions window now. Okay, Sasha, first question. At the end, where should I start in Azure Security? What would be the first thing I should do?
Well, I would, since there are a lot of things to in Azure that have security prefix or suffix, then the first thing probably I would check Azure Security Center, and because it will give you the quick overview and general overview of what's wrong, and at least you will know where to. It is something to begin with. At least you will know where to begin, and there you will see the biggest, let's say, things to fix in a security area. So I would say Azure Security Center is the way is the first thing to check whether everything is okay.
Okay, next question. Are there any firewall resource group restrictions?
Yeah. Yes. Azure Firewall. I'm not sure about the other, but if we talk about Azure Firewall, the firewall itself and the subnet where the firewall sits on, where it's configured, the firewall's public IP and the virtual network. All these resources have to reside in the same resource group. So that's the only restriction for the resource group. Well, there are service limits as well, but if we talk specifically about resource groups, yes, all these things have to be reside in the same resource group.
Okay, what is best practice to implement row-level security in SQL database that is accessed through the function app that is secured with Azure AD?
So could you repeat the question? What is the best practice to?
Best practice to implement row-level security, or I'm wondering, is that low-level security? It could be a typo, in SQL database that is accessed through the function app that is secured with Azure AD.
Oh, I don't know by the right right now. I'm not sure about it. There, yeah, not sure about it. Well, if you can, yeah. Whoever asked the question, sorry. If you could contact me on Twitter and pose a question, then I'll answer there. I'm not sure right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. On behalf of the ESPC community, thank you, Sasha, for taking the time today to complete this webinar. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Great, Sasha. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, just to let you all know that ESPC team discounts allow you to book 4 tickets and receive your 5th ticket free. That's a huge 20% discount worth up to €1,795 for a huge amount of team learning and development. Join the best SharePoint, Office 365 and Azure practitioners in the world in Prague this December and go to the next level faster. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com for further details. As Sasha mentioned, this is Azure Week, and tomorrow will be our next webinar, and that is End-to-End Strategy on the Microsoft Cloud. Join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. CEST. This is the end of the webinar today. Don't forget to see sharepointeurope.com for further details of all upcoming webinars, or visit our resource center for all previous episodes. Thank you once again to Sasha Krasnets, and take care and goodbye.